Did you know that Mulkraj Anand spent the First World War working as a scriptwriter for the BBC in London, where he became a friend of George Orwell? After reading Anand's The Sword and the Sickle, Orwell felt that another dialect has grown up in English, which is comparable to Irish English. Orwell's prediction came true, as we now have a dialect called Indian English. There are new works coming out every year written in the Indian English dialect. The literature written in this dialect is called Indian English literature. Now, on with the show. Good evening and welcome to episode 3 of the Writer's Preview. The Writer's Preview is a literal original show on YouTube where we invite authors to showcase their latest work. We are happy to have Kez Wickham St George as our guest for this episode. She is here to talk about her latest book, The Kapatri. Hello, Kez.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, Kez, and welcome to the Writer's Preview.
Thank you.
How are you doing today, Kez?
Very well, thank you.
So you're talking to us from Australia and it's 9 p.m. there for you. It must have been
Perth, yes.
It must have been a long and tiring day for you as well.
No, long but not tiring.
Yeah. So I hope you have enough energy left for the Writer's Preview, Kez.
I'll try not to fall asleep.
So your novel, The Kapatri, is going to be released soon on the 27th of March. It is actually the second book in the series. Can you tell us how The Kapatri continues the story from the first novel, Metal Mermaid, Kez?
Well, the first book, it finishes with me coming back to my home, and which is in Rockingham and Perth. And I start off the second book deciding to buy another caravan to travel again. Because in real life, I do travel a lot. So in the book, I buy another little caravan and we take it apart and we repair everything we have to repair on it, and off we go again. And this time I take my grandson with me. So that was the start of The Kapatri, yes.
Since you have been describing to us the events of the novel in the first person, can we expect a first person perspective in the novel?
No, I always write in third person in the novel, yeah.
And does it have any autobiographical elements in it? Yes.
No. Yeah, no, so well, most of the book is, it's a fiction book, but all the stories in it are fairly true. When I go camping in my caravan, people come to me and tell me their stories, and I write them down and make a story out of them. So it's a fiction book. Some of the stories are true, some aren't.
So certain real world events and characters did inspire you in writing The Kapatri, but yes. You mixed your own creativity in it, right, Kez?
Of course, yes. Okay. Of course, yeah.
The Kapatri is a romance thriller. Do you write only in the romance thriller genre, Kez?
It's sort of a romance. It's really about a woman that goes on an adventure, and her husband, before she goes on the adventure, her husband passes away. So she has to learn to live on her own and travel on her own. And that's a very big thing to do, to be on your own like that. And she has to learn how. So it's all about really a woman learning how and growing up without a partner. But on her travels, she meets another man. And doesn't want to get involved, is very scared of getting involved with him because she was married for a very long time, and she has children to her deceased husband. And typical story of children not wanting you to get remarried and all the rest of it. So she goes through a little bit, and then she gets in the caravan and off she travels again, and she just learns sort of how to grow up and live without a man in your life. Yeah.
So it is a female protagonist novel then?
More or less, yes. She's the lead character, yes. Her name's Tara. And Tara. And yes, she is the female lead there, yeah.
And am I right in assuming that Tara is a wanderlust and she likes to travel a lot?
Oh, yes. She's just like the writer. Loves to travel.
We'll talk about that soon. And I haven't read the first novel yet, Metal Mermaid. And if I start with the Kapatri, will I feel left out? Can this book be read as a standalone novel? Yes.
Yeah, definitely can. You would, in the beginning of the book, I write a little bit about the Kapatri, but this book will, in the beginning of Kapatri, I write a little bit about Metal Mermaid, and then you sort of click onto the second book really quickly.
Sure, Kez. How would you describe your latest book, The Kapatri, in just one sentence? I ask you this because we are living in a technology-driven world where people have a less and less attention span. So if you can just give us a one-sentence summary of The Kapatri, what would it be, Kez?
Adventure, romance, excitement.
It's like an adventure. Is it like a, how do you say this? Since we are adding the tag thriller to the genre, does it have a mystery where it needs to be solved by the female protagonist then?
The Kapatri has a little bit of a thriller in it. When I write, I tend to go up and I'll take the reader up into a big mountain, and then I'll go down the other side. So it has a bit of a thriller in it, but more adventure, more than anything else. This is all about traveling around Australia, people I meet, where I stay, and their effect on me. Because when you stay at people's places, you have an effect on them, and they have an effect on you. So it's where I stay, who I meet, their stories. Yeah, it's not a bio. It's definitely, but I have actually been to all of those. The places I write about, I've actually been to.
So you have definitely been to places where the story takes place in the Kapatri. I already talked about Tara being a wanderlust. What inspired you to travel when you were in New Zealand? Kez, was it to know more about the unknown world around you, or is it something that was imbibed in you when you were young? Kez?
I think it started when I was young. My father and mother travelled a lot. My father, he was in the Second World War, and so he had lots of contacts. So we used to borrow this great big army truck for all of the 4 weeks of Christmas that we used to have in New Zealand when I was a little girl. And we'd put a big tent in there, and my sisters would get in there, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of excitement, and we'd go camping all over the North Island of New Zealand. And as I grew up, we'd visit Australia and come home again, or Fiji, Rarotonga, all the South Pacific Islands we would visit. And then when I got married, my husband, his business took him all over New Zealand. So I travelled with him. And then once we had children, I stayed put and put them through school. But when they were about 5 or 6, for the school holidays, we would travel again, just coming to Australia. And then when they all left home and they gave me grandchildren, and my grandchildren grew up and went to school, my husband and I decided to move to Australia to live here, because we've always loved Australia. It's a beautiful country and it's huge. It's very, very big. And there's lots of travel here. But the funny thing is, since I've been in Australia, I've been around the world twice. So I just don't stop traveling. You know, I might come home for 2 or 3 months. And I mean, during COVID, we all had to stay home. But that was great. I got to write my books and have some fun with that, and memories and looking at photographs. And so, yeah, I do travel quite extensively. And I've seen one place I haven't been is India.
So you haven't been to India then?
No.
You can always come and visit us. It's a really interesting
Love
place.
to.
Since we have talked about your travels all over the world, now let's talk about your publishing journey. Before you became a writer, you said that you were a teacher. And what inspired you to become a writer? Was it the traveling, or was it something that you had when you were, the ambition you had when you were a little Kez?
I've always been a writer. I've always written, when I was a little girl, wrote little things like little sentences. And then when I was about 7, I won a gold star for writing about the Easter Bunny, which I don't think you'd know about over there, the Easter Bunny we have here. But I wrote a little wee story, about 2 sentences, and I won this gold star, and it's been with me ever since. I've always thought of that. I want to reach for the gold star. And last year I was made bestseller, so I think I've got the gold star now. But it's I've always written little bits. And when I became a teacher and worked in a tourism school, again, it was writing about the places you've been and what you see and the people you meet and the particular places and where you're visiting. So it's always been of a great interest of me when I read tourism brochures of how they describe where they are and how many people are there and what can I see while I'm there. I just find it fascinating.
So your travel writing experience must have had a lot of impact on your writing in fiction. And were you an avid reader when you were young, or
yes?
The readers automatically transform into writers, and you always knew that you had a writer in you even when you were young, Kez. What I want to ask is, there is always a duality between the quantity and quality in terms of writing output. What do you prefer, Kez? Do you want to be known as a writer with the most number of novels, or the one with the best quality of novels, Kez?
Oh, that's a hard one, Catholic. It's really hard. Look, to be honest, I just love writing. And if it's a book, if it turns out to be a book, it's a book. That's my first passion. My second one is as a writer's consultant. I show a lot of people how to write their books. And I find a lot of people that are stuck and they don't know how to write. So I help them. But that's a hard question. I would say it's not the quantity of books, it's the quality of books that interests me. I do a lot of book reviews, and some of the books I read as a book reviewer, I wouldn't read. I would not read at all. So I have to, I do a lot of speed reading, and I speed read the books, maybe half of them, so I can talk about them. But when I find a good book, I can't put it down. So it's the quality. It's the quality, I would say, of the book that I enjoy.
So your choice is always quality over quantity then?
Definitely.
Yeah. And you told us about being a book reviewer. In your experience of reviewing books, do you feel that today's writing and writers are lagging behind in terms of storytelling, or are we going up in the trajectory then?
I think so. I think since COVID and people staying home have realized they've got time on their hands and they can write. Everybody can write. Everybody. If you can put a pencil in your hand or get to a keyboard, you can write. I don't care if it's just drawing pictures, you can do something like that. But since COVID, I must have seen about 40 books published by one publisher in about 6 months. That's an awful lot of books to publish. But people were literally, coming and saying, I've written a book. So it did do something. It actually made people stop and think and write.
So the writing output has been the same even in the middle of a crisis like COVID then? Or is it more?
Yeah, a bit more.
A bit more. People have had some time to think since they are stuck at in their homes now. Can you tell us how many books you have had published, yes, up until now?
10 books published, and that includes 3 children's books published, because I've written in the 3 genres. I like to try different things. So those 3 children's books, they're in the Royal Palace of Britain. They were read by the Queen of Denmark and with New Zealand Prime Minister. And with my other books, the paranormal books and these books I'm putting out now, they're just popular with everyday readers. You know, what I try and do is I write a book so you can have a good read, put it down, go away, do something. When you get back to the book, you know exactly where you are.
You told us that you have written books in 3 genres and a total of 10 books have been published. Writing in the same genre or the types of genres can be monotonous and boring as a writer. Are there other genres that you want to try your hand in or interested in writing? Yes.
Crime. I'd like to try a crime book. I'm not very good at crime. No, I've tried a little bit. I'm not very good at it because I don't like crime at all. I find it hard to watch TV where there's murders and I just get, oh, yuck, that's yucky, I'll walk away. I don't really like, I think there's enough in our life without having to write about it where it's crime's concerned. But I'll give it a go. And yeah, there's a lot of fiction I would like to try, like just pure fiction about space, about sci-fi. I mean, a sci-fi book's quite exciting to write. So there's those 2 I would like to have a try at, yes.
Thank you, Kez. And it's really interesting to know what goes on in the mind of the writer, especially what genres they want to try their hand in. Other than novels, do you also write other forms of literature, Kez?
I've written poetry. I've written a fair amount of poetry. And what I did with that one is I created a corridor between Ako, Japan, which is where I live. It's one of our sister cities. So I went over to Japan and met some people over there, and we agreed to write a book together. And so I created a corridor between the 2 countries, and we wrote a book together. It was called Entwined, and that was full of poetry and art. It was lovely.
Your collaboration with the Japanese, is she an artist or a writer, Kez?
The people I collaborated with?
He was a group of people in Japan then?
There was 2. One was the interpreter, and one was an artist, and one was a poet. So the 3 of us collaborated with what I had already had, because I'll often write poetry. So I put my poetry into the book. They put their artwork and poems into the book as well. Yeah.
Did you feel that the interpreter might have said something that might have been lost in translation between the 3 of you? Yes.
No. We worked really hard together, and it took nearly a year. Nearly a year to bring that book out. But if there was any sort of misunderstanding in the translation, we would make sure that Michigo, the translator, her and I would type and talk for ages, making sure that the short stories I wrote weren't insulting to the Japanese, because, people have different cultures. So when you write a short story and present it to another culture, you can't insult them. And so I had to make sure that none of my stories of poetry were insulting, or they didn't like them just as well that they loved the book. So that was a big relief.
When you talked about Japanese literature, I am reminded of the haiku, where brevity takes precedence over content. Was it easy collaborating with Japanese poet and mixing ideas together, Kez?
I found it easy because if you're patient and take your time, you can collaborate with anybody. I mean, there's a lot of different nationalities living in Australia and in Rockingham where I live, and you just have to listen very carefully to what they're saying. Sometimes you miss, because of the accent, you miss words, but I'm a New Zealander, so I speak very fast, and they miss what I say as well. So it's just, being patient with each other and learning the rhythm of your speech is very important.
Yeah, listening with patience and responding is the way to go then.
Yes.
The Kapatri blends two different genres together. The one is romance, the other one is thriller. How do these two genres combine together to create a unique experience in the novel, Kez?
You're talking about poetry and the Kapatri?
No. Well, now we are talking just about the Kapatri, the one you're promoting here today. Yes.
Okay. How does it create an experience? Well, it takes you on a journey. So you start off with me, or the lead character, in a caravan, and we head off up north. So I take you on my journey, and there's it's fun. It's fun all the way through.
It's a fun journey, and a car and a caravan and an open road, and multitudes of experience, multitudes of fun waiting for you to waiting to happen, I guess. What sparked the initial idea for the entire book series as a whole, Kez?
What sparked it? I love to write, and I just thought to myself, perhaps someone would be interested in reading about where I've been and who I've met. And I didn't want to put it down and I didn't want to put it down like a diary.
Like
so
I started.
Well, I don't want to do that either, because it's a story.
Yeah.
So it's I've always been a storyteller, and I just love writing. So the story came out, and then the next one, and then the next one, and they're all sitting inside the computer, all waiting to be written.
Okay, then. How long did it take for you to finish the Kapatri?
It takes me a year to write a book. It's a big book. It's 400 pages. So it takes me about a year. But it takes my editor about a month to go through it and check with me what she's done. And then it's handed back to the publisher. It might take her about 2 weeks to get it published and sit in my hands.
So when you start writing a novel, do you plan everything out in the beginning of the writing process, or do you just go with the flow and see what comes out
with the flow?
out of the mind that is the unconscious case?
Look, I write with, teaching people to write is, some people, we're all different, okay? So some people like to plan it out and have all the details on paper. And I have a map on my wall where all over Australia, I've got little pins stuck wherever I've been. And that's all I do is I would check the name of a place where I go or I've been, and I make sure that's in there correctly. But some of my writers, they have these sheets of paper. It's a planned book, and if that's the way they want to work and make them happy, then that's the way they work. It's what suits you. It's not what suits anyone else. It's what suits you.
So spontaneity is the magic word then when it comes to writing a novel, according to you, Kez?
The word's magic. Nothing else, just magic.
Okay. Since you use the word magic, do you have any vague interest in trying your hand at fantasy novels, Kez?
Oh, yes, definitely. With the children, it's all fantasy. Children's books, it's all fantasy. That's a good genre to write in, because you can have so much fun with that genre as well. Excuse me, you can have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, fantasy is a lot of fun to write as well as to read. My next question to you is, where did the inspiration for Tara come from? Who's the main character in the novel?
I've always loved the name. Always loved that name, Tara. And I've got 3 daughters, and none of them are called Tara. But I used it as the character in my book. It's a name I fell in love with. I think I watched a movie once, and the lead character was Tara, and I just fell in love with the name.
So the love of the name created Tara, but what about the characterization, the psychology of the character? Did
the psychology of the characters. Oh, well, that's a little bit of me in there. I'm a senior woman, and so when you take a senior woman on the road, there's all sorts of things you have to be aware of, and that goes in the book as well. It's if you simplify it down, and you don't make too much of things, and you don't go into the drama of life, your book's going to get boring. So there's a lot of drama in there. There's a bit of fiction. Well, 50% of it's fiction. So it's just they're fun. It's what I love to do. Is I know that when I'm writing, I'm actually drawing people's views into these people in the book. They're not real people. They're fiction.
So the Kapatri is a fiction about the adventures of Tara, and
Yes.
since you have talked to us about what went into the characterization of Tara, can you tell us more about the themes found in your novel, Kez?
The
Themes,
Okay.
plural.
Okay. The theme of my novel is adventure. Get out there and have some adventure if you can. Otherwise, be an armchair adventurer, as that's what we call them over here when you can't get out and travel. Watch your travel programs, read your travel books, buy my book, read the book. It's full of adventure and fun things, and a little bit, it's just the fun things we do. Especially as you get older and older, you can't always get out there and travel. So while you can, get out there and do it.
Yesterday I came across an interesting idea from this comic book writer called Frank Miller, and he told in this interview he was talking about his inspiration for writing his work, which came out in the 80s, and he said that I was looking for inspiration and it was outside my window, and I looked out, the culture was there and I was there, so I am the culture. When it comes to the Kapatri, you must have had serious themes throughout the novel. If you can tell us about how the world in the Kapatri reflects the real world, it would be fruitful for us, Kez.
How the real world affects the Kapatri. Oh my goodness. So the real world is in the Kapatri. There's places I've been, people I meet, and the experiences they have. So when you're talking to someone and they tell you about an adventure or an experience, it's very real for them. Now you have to take that story and be very careful with it and have to put it in a book. So you put it to bed in the book. And he's right when he says he looks out the window and saw a culture out there, because I often just sit and look out my office window and think, I've got a massive tree outside my office window. And I often think to myself, if that tree could tell me stories, I wonder what it would say, because it's very old. And that's to me, that's a children's book. What's in the tree? Wherever I go, I often just listen to the conversation. I don't often say a lot because I'm listening. And for anyone that's listening to this show, the most honor you can ever give a person, the biggest honor you can ever give anyone, is to listen to them. I don't care what they're saying. Spend that time and listen to them. I don't care how old they are, because you've actually given them part of you. That's a huge honor. So when I'm writing, I've actually stopped and listened to these people, and you're listening to me. Well, yes, I am. And I'm writing it all down. I've got it all in here. So it's an honor.
Lending your ears to people's life stories and sorrows is something that you do, spending a precious time with them. That goes into your work. So that's how real life is reflected in the Kapatri. It was really interesting to know that, Kez. My next question is, what is the best part of being a published author, Kez?
The best about being a published author is you get read. If you've got a good publisher, she will make sure that your name gets out there. I have an excellent publisher, and she works very hard to make sure that my name is out there as a writer. But I've been writing for many years, so I am known as a writer. and as a writer's coach. And I also dabble in a little bit of art. So whichever hat I'm wearing for the day, that's who I am for the day.
So the accumulated experiences that you have had as a writer and a coach must have taught you a lot about the nuances of writing. But what paved the way for you to become a coach? Did you studiously learn how to write, or did it come naturally to you, Kez?
It just comes naturally to me. Yeah. Why I wanted to become a coach is because I found I had a lot of people ringing me for advice, and I was spending a lot of time on the phone and on Zoom calls advising a lot of people how to write their books, and I wasn't getting any work done. So I had to more or less say, well, I am a writer's coach and I can help you, but there are certain times I will work with you and there's certain times I won't.
So,
but I just found it came naturally.
Yeah, wearing different hats according to the situation must have made you really good at multitasking. But when it comes to actually sitting down and writing, different writers have different quirks and habits. Can you tell us about your creative working space? Where do you write? And is there anything vital you need to get started, Kez?
Well, I have a little wee office here, and normally I'll wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning and there'll be an idea in my head, and I'll grab my notebook and I'll write it down, and then I'll go back to sleep. I might write a page, then I'll go back to sleep. And I'll wake up in the morning and I'll put a story around it. So the bulk of the story is already written early in the morning. And then when I wake up and I've had breakfast, I'll work around it. So I work in a little wee room. It's not very big. I've got all my beautiful things that I want to have around me. And I look at different objects, like I'm looking at one at the moment, and I was in Spain when I bought that. And they just bring back memories of what I did and how I did it.
So your travels took you all over the world, but now you are settled in Australia. What part of Australia attracted you the most after you came there, Kez?
Okay, I've been to all the major cities, and I love Perth. I think Perth's a beautiful city, and the beaches here are just to die for, even though we've got lots of sharks. So I don't go swimming in the beach very often, but they're the most beautiful blue and the sand is white and we've got palm trees and it's just beautiful. And Perth is a beautiful city.
The city of Perth, are lovely. The city of Perth, with its natural landscape, attracted you the most. But when it comes to actual people, I mean, the people living in those places, do you say the same for Perth, or do you have other options, Kez?
Other cities.
Other cities. I mean, the actual people.
Okay, Perth. I have found Sydney very, very busy, extremely busy. They don't have much time for you. I found Melbourne, extremely busy, very, very busy. But I had family there, so I didn't go there to write. I went to visit family. And all the major cities, I found when I came to Perth just opened its arms up to me and said, welcome. And so I started writing and started publishing like small articles with different writing clubs and they recognized the writer in me. So I just loved it here. But I found wherever you go, if you want to make it home, you make it home and people accept you for who and what you are. It's just for the first few weeks you're there, you might be a bit lonely. But I found that Perth was a beautiful place to be and I don't want to live anywhere else really. If someone said to me, go back to New Zealand, I'd have to think about it. Because New Zealand's a very beautiful place as well. And that's where I was born. But, I do love Perth.
So do you miss back home, New Zealand, Kez?
I used to, but not anymore.
So
I used to get very homesick.
So I completely switched over to being an Australian then now, yes?
Yes, well and truly. Yeah.
Let's talk about your experience as a reader. I mean, have you always been a good reader of fiction, or do you read mostly other forms of literature, Kez?
Catholic, if you could see my library, which is right beside me, I read anything and everything. There's some books I enjoy, and there's some books I don't enjoy. And I might flick through a few pages and put aside. But my bookcase is chock-a-block, full of all sorts of books, children's books, fiction, paranormal, travel, is all there.
So if you are given the opportunity to sit in one place without doing any work for a day and a coffee in your hand, a cup of coffee in your hand, what would you read then and there? Yes.
What would I read? I would read, I believe there's a new fiction book out, and it's not the Kapatri. So what's the name of the author? Here it is, here. It is called Getting There by Michael Rhodes. He's got a new book out, and that's what I would sit down and read. It's a spiritual story, and I love spiritual stories. Yeah.
During my preparation for the show, I read a lot of works by Mulkraj Anand, and he's an Indian novelist. In the beginning of his career, his writing was mostly centered on the nationalism and secularism, but in the later stages of his life, his works concentrated more on the spiritual awakening of an individual. At this point in your life, do you consider spiritualism as one of the important aspects of your work, Kez?
How do you mean?
Do you consider spiritual awareness as important part of the novel or of the characters in the novel, Kez?
The spiritual side of things, it comes down to what you're prepared to believe. So if people aren't prepared, if they just think your story is stupid, they're not going to read it. But, and that's where a good writing coach comes in. She will say, well, look, it doesn't sound right. Can we do something with it? So my spiritual journey, it changes all the time. I have a basic faith, but my spirituality is very accepting. And I can accept many different things unless it comes down to terror. I can't accept that. And I can't accept racism or sexism or anything like that. I don't accept it. Spirituality comes in many different ways, and it lights your own light in many different ways. So I guess it's what you're willing to take on board and what you can believe for yourself.
That was a really good answer, I guess. Normally we expect answers such as belief in God and other religious aspects, but you dwelled into life's problems and life's difficulties such as racism and sexism. What I wanted to get that kind of answer from my guest, and today you have given us the exact answer. That's what spirituality is all about. It's all about awakening oneself and reclaiming your own life from within. That's what I feel.
That's right. Yes.
Since we have talked about the Kapatri, before the interview, we were talking about the significance of the title, and it was really interesting to know about the origins of the title. Let me ask you once again, what is the meaning of the word the Kapatri? Yes.
The Kapatri it was an adventure that actually happened. So in the book, the lead character, she drives into the bush to camp for overnight, and she meets other campers there. And before she drives in, she has a phone call that says that she just has a baby grandchild has been born. And she's very excited, and she shares this news with the other people that are camping there, and they're strangers to her. She shares the news, and they drink the baby's health with a cup of billy tea. So when you hear, how the outback and everybody else is drinking beer, well, they don't. They drink billy tea. So in my book, we we congratulate the parents with a cup of billy tea, and then in the book we hang the cup on a tree branch.
So that's why the tree is called the Kapatri.
Yes.
I hope our readers will be fascinated after hearing that story behind the title of the novel. As a reader, I always have a certain perspective when I read a novel. But as a writer, from your perspective, you must have an idea about how you want the readers to perceive the novel, I guess. So, what do you hope readers will take away from reading the Kapatri? Yes.
Excitement about life. Excitement that just poking your head out the door can bring in so much into your life. You just have to stand out there and see what's happening. You know, the world's a huge place. Australia is a massive country. So I take you in the Metal Mermaid, I take you to New Zealand, and we travel the width and breadth of New Zealand, and then I bring you back to Australia. And then in the Kapatri, I take you around Australia. And in the next book, it's between the two countries, and I also take you to Fiji. So, and having been to all those countries and travelled quite extensively, there's places that I know quite well, and there's some places I've had to do the research on.
So, during your research, do you gather information from your own travels, or do you refer books and resources from the internet, Kez?
No, it's always the stories I'm told, the people I meet, the places I've been. You know, it's when you're writing, you get lost in the story, you get lost in the journey, and so you just keep writing. And you can either think to yourself, that's a really good chapter or paragraph I've written, and it will it'll make the reader be invested in the book, or you can think that's a load of rubbish and just delete it. So it's up to you. It really is up to you how you write a book. But then again, you've got to if you're going to publish a book, then people are going to read it and they're going to make up their minds about you as a writer, whether they want to continue to write your book or not, to read your book or not. And that's a huge driving force, because I want to be read. I want people to enjoy where I have been and meet the people I have met and tell their stories.
So all the information that you have gathered and used for your books were all first-hand experiences, nothing second-hand then.
Yeah.
And that's a really honest way of writing a book. Thank you, Kez. And my next question to you is, you read a lot of novels, and you also read other forms of literature, from what you have said to me. Some writers must have really inspired you and must have taken you along a very dreamlike journey when you were reading their works. So can you name some of the writers that have inspired you along the way to publication, Kez?
I really enjoyed Michelle Obama's book, and that was a bio. Let me think. Oprah Winfrey, I really enjoyed two of her books. One was a bio and two were spiritual books. I really enjoyed those. Michael Rhodes, I've also really enjoyed his books. They're very prominent writers who I'm speaking about, and they have a lot of books out there. But when they write, they're forceful writers. They make you stop and think. I love a thinking book. The other book I'd like to talk about with you is a book written by Diana Henderson, and that was just recently published in Australia. And that was a book called Reflections, and that was an amazing book. I actually did a live interview with her because it really made me stop and think about how everyone perceives everything different. So you're watching me on a screen, you're perceiving me as you see me, but I'm very different to what you see.
Yeah, different people have different ways of perceiving others, I guess. So
we all wear very many hats, don't we? All of us wear a lot of hats these days.
You are right, Kez. My next question to you is, since you read a lot of autobiography, do you have a passing interest in reading history books, Kez, about our past history?
Yes, I love past history. I love 18th century. I love 18th century books. So when someone produces a book that's all about, I don't know, especially during the era of the Black Plague, and I love pirate stories too. I love them. I love pirates on the sea and hiding their treasure, and I think that's it's fun. I love stories about when someone writes about the 18th century, they obviously haven't been there because they're writing today. But the research they've done, it always amazes me about the research these people do. It really is amazing. There's a writer out there called Juliet Logan who writes all about 18th century. And the research she does, she's actually showed me the folders and folders of research she does before she writes. And I admire that.
So donning a pirate hat and sailing the open seas is the ultimate form of having an adventure, I guess.
It's the next best thing.
Yeah. So along those lines, my next question is, if you could slip back in time in a past history, what era would you travel to and why?
I'd go to the 1930s. I adore that era. I think it's because it was a slower time, a very slow time, horse and cart, and women and men. And this isn't sexism, but we knew our place in those eras. Women brought the children up. They educated the children about health and about life. And the men went to work and did their jobs at work. But, it was just a different lifestyle. So I was born in the 1940s and it was post-war. And so New Zealand was 10 years behind everybody else. So when there was motor cars in Australia, we still had the horse and cart. So that era really appeals to me because I remember the peace, the actual peace. No one was rushed. No one rushed. Everybody, there was no yelling. There was no, of course there was a lot hidden behind doors that has now been opened. But in my life, when I was a little girl, everything was delivered by horse and cart. It was a very slow way of life, and you were taught in a very early age respect and love for one another in the family circle. Now, my family circle was huge because my family married into a Maori tribe. So I had a lot of family and cousins, and there was nothing but respect for each other in that family. I think that's been lost. I really do.
The times were simpler back then in the 1930s, and we did not have technology overwhelming us with new and interesting things coming out every decade or so. And now,
but there were still writers, and you still read.
Yeah,
I mean, I used to read books like about adventure and I don't know, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, all those were beautiful. Robinson Crusoe. They were adventure stories. And I think that's what encouraged me to do adventures because I just loved them.
Does the word dime novel ring a bell to you, Kez? Because I've been hearing this word dime novel during my research on the internet, and it's always fascinating to see things that are not existing in this world right now. Where they give you a short story written in a few pages, but it actually is a standalone novel or so. Do you have the habit of reading dime novels, Kez?
Do I have what, sorry?
Adventure novels during your childhood.
It was all adventure. My parents were very religious, so it was either Bible or adventure stories. And I read a lot of I read a lot of Bible stories as well, but a lot of adventure stories as well. So all those people I just named, they were stories about people getting lost at sea and finding the islands, and they lived on them and building houses in the trees, and everything was just a magical time. Now, I was a child, so yeah, I don't know how my parents felt about. I mean, I know that they would be absolutely amazed if they could see what we do today and how I contact people overseas and they contact me, what we're doing now. They wouldn't believe it. They would not believe it's all happened, because we lived in a neighborhood that we all felt very safe in and loved in, and everybody knew each other. So if a kid was sick and mum had to rush off to the shops, and the neighbor would come and look after the kid. It was a different era. It was a very soft, gentle era for me. And that's what I loved about it. Of course, there were things behind closed doors. There was things that happened that are very public today and are trying to be stopped today. But in New Zealand, because there was no such thing as black and white, there was nothing. We married into different races, and it was accepted. So when all this racism, it was such a shock to learn about it and think, why has this happened? Because everyone bleeds red. Everyone breathes in oxygen. Our bodies are all the same inside. We all look the same inside. So it was a big shock for me as a child to learn that there was racism in the world. Huge shock, because all my cousins and aunties and uncles had brown skin. And so they were Maori, and we loved them and they loved us. And so if I had to go back, it would be the 90s, 1930s.
Yeah, definitely a good answer, Kez. You talked about technology having its own pluses and minuses, but we are doing the show right now live on YouTube, and you are talking to us from Australia, and we are talking to you from India. And this, I have to say, is a positive aspect of the technology and internet, I guess, because it had brought us closer together, even though we are living in different parts of the world. So everything has two different sides to it, I guess. The positive side is that it enables us to communicate with each other, and the negative side is that it really overwhelms us sometimes. My next question to you is, you have finished the Kapatri, and it's going to be published on the 27th of March. So what is next on the horizon for Kez Wickham St George? Do you have any writing projects you would like to share with us on the show, Kez?
After the Kapatri is published, I will be bringing out in September. There's another book. It's an anthology of about 20 different women that have joined me in this book. So that will be published. Then the year after that, around about December, January, I'll be publishing another book. It'll be the end of the trilogy. And it's called The Talking Stick.
The Talking Stick will be the final book in the trilogy then?
Yes.
So we'll be getting closure in terms of Tara's life story in the novel then?
Yes. Yeah, Tara's going to go to sleep for a while.
2020 is almost is over, and we are in the opening stages of 2021. So what 2021 book releases are you most excited to read, Kez?
2021 other books in mine. There is the anthology coming out with 20 other different stories in it. I find that exciting because everyone's been given so many words to use, and it's going to be 20 different stories. I find that that's called The Colours of Me, that book. And then there's 2 or 3 authors that I work with that are bringing all their books out, and they're all fiction stories. So, a good author to watch out for is a lady called Michelle Wittery. She writes fantasy, and she'll be bringing another book out as well. So they're all exciting times.
The next question is actually a question that we ask every author that comes on to our show. What is your favorite word in the English language, Kez?
Flourish.
Flourish.
Yeah.
Do you use it often in your novels, Kez?
I do. Well, not often. It's a byword of mine. I don't use it often. I think maybe twice in a book I may have used it. I use it mainly on my Facebook page when I'm talking to other writers, because we all need to flourish in the situations we're in now with COVID and that we need to flourish in a different way.
And how is Australia handling COVID crisis?
Oh, beautifully. Yeah, beautifully. Where I live in Perth, there's nothing. There's nothing at the moment. So we're all free to walk around and go shopping and that. I mean, I even went to the movies the other day to see it with a friend. So, and we don't have to wear masks anymore. We just have to be very careful. You know, we still have to be the 1.5 meterage away from each other, and we have to wash our hands, which is you do normally. But you just have to be very careful and very careful of your health. You know, if you've got a cold, stay home, and just the normal things you'd do.
Yeah. Thank you, Kez. And I hope that we can overcome this crisis called COVID, and we can move on from this epidemic. We always ask our novelists to read a few excerpts from the novel they are promoting on the show. Since your novel has not been published yet, and it will be out into the public's hands in the 27th of March, what we want to ask you is, can you read a short excerpt from the previous novel, Metal Mermaid? Yes.
Okay. So it's from Metal Mermaid. Okay. So nighttime fell quickly. I no longer wanted to sit outside and ponder who did what today. I wanted my bed. By 8 p.m., it was a quick wash and a good night to all, the three of us sitting down with books, and soon we were all fast asleep. Our next destination was Monkey Mia. I wanted to show my grandson the dolphins, and this time the tourist advertising in the brochure came in very handy. It wasn't a long drive, and we went straight into a caravan park for an overnight booking. The office was full of information on what, where, and how, and what to see. My friend wanted to watch the dolphins as well, so I thought, why not all three of us go? And we went to watch these beautiful mammals at feeding time on the water's edge. We fought for space between the overseas tourists who pushed, shoved, yelled, and slapped the water, trying to attract the poor dolphins their way. The ranger was so busy trying to keep one particular lively family at bay. They had started bombing the water with huge chunks of bread and didn't have time to notice one very small dolphin behind them. It was so tiny, it seemed no one else had noticed it. I took my grandson by the hand and led him into the water. We waited patiently, hoping for just one small encounter. The dolphin swiveled onto its side and looked at me straight in the eye. Its face was beautiful. It was amazing. My grandson leant over to stroke its face, and I put my hand under its chin, and I held it. My voice just above a whisper, talking to the dolphin as if it was a small, lost child. I have no idea of how long we spent doing that. I just knew it touched my soul deeply right inside. It backed its way out of my hand, and its little baby tail, Fluke, working furiously, darted off to hide in the depths, reminding me of a small child who'd been caught with its hand in the cookie jar. I could have sworn it smiled at me. My friend's voice broke through my daydreaming. Geez, you're lucky to be able to have that sort of karma with dolphins. The ranger overheard and said, what dolphin? I'm still trying to call them in for their feeding schedule. I looked at my friend and I looked at my grandson, shaking my head, leading the way back to our caravan. My heart was in heaven. I could not believe what had just happened, and I felt 10 feet tall. Any sad heaviness that had gone, none of us were sure it was just what happened. It was just a beautiful, happy outcome. There we go.
Thank you for that.
So I've taken it. So Monkey Mia is a real place, and you can feed the dolphins there.
Thank you for that wonderful reading session, Kez. We learned, we heard a lot of seaside activities. Is it Tara going on a journey to the seaside?
Yes. Yeah.
So the three novels have Tara as the central character then?
Say that again, sorry.
So all the three novels have Tara as the central character?
Oh, yes, Tara is the main character in all three novels. Can't do without Tara. And she's the lead character in all three novels. So once I finished the talking stick, she's going to go to sleep for a while.
Thank you, Kez. Now we have time for questions from the YouTube audience. Can you take some of the questions from our YouTube audience, Kez?
Sure.
Okay, then. This question comes from Joshua Salem, and he asks, your genre has always been romance thrillers. What made you prefer this genre?
What made me choose this genre? Because it's the genre that I prefer to write, and it seems to be more interesting for my readers to read this sort of genre when it's more interesting. It's interesting for them, but it has to be what they want to read too. I mean, you can't tell someone to read your book and they actually want to read a crime story. So that's the genre I write in, and people know what I write.
Doing something that you're good at is the way to go.
Yes.
The next question comes from Pallavi Rajaratnam. What is your favorite cover out of all your books? And she asks, why is it your favorite?
What is my favorite cover? Goodness me. Well, so far I would say this one here, which is Metal Mermaid. You see that one there? That's my favorite.
Is it a campfire?
It's a campfire. Yeah, it's a campfire. But the next one, the next cover of the Kapatri, that's my favorite now. So every time a new book cover comes out, it becomes my favorite cover. I don't have just one.
So the campfire one was was Metal Mermaid then?
Campfire, they've all got the campfire. All my book covers for the trilogy have got that campfire on them. Yeah.
Okay. And the next question comes from Tike, and he asks, do you like writing poetry or fiction more?
I love both, actually. I'm addicted to poetry and I just love writing what I do. My favorite thing is to get other authors to write poetry with me. And I find that's another journey. That's just opening up corridors all over the world that other poets can join you. So, yeah, I do enjoy both. All the genres I write I really love, but poetry does have a special place for me, yes.
Okay, then. Next question comes from Shankar, and he asks, what other profession would you have chosen if you had not become a writer?
Oh, I would have chosen to be a tourism guide. So
guiding the tourists around Australia would have been a dream job for you then, Kez?
Yeah, but either that or working as a hostess on an airplane. That would have been a fabulous job too, because it would have flown all over the world.
Thank you for that answer, Kez. Next question comes from Raj, and he asks, would you consider yourself a wanderlust?
Definitely. I was born that way.
Your sense of adventure was something that you developed as an inspiration from your parents. Do you consider yourself? Did you transfer those ideas to your children and your grandchildren, Kez? Just like your parents did?
I think so. I think, yeah. I haven't had a lot to do with my grandchildren because I live over here and they're in New Zealand. But the one I did have a lot to do with, he loved to write. And I think he is a traveller. He loves to travel. His mother, not so much, but yeah, my grandson, yes, very much. So he was only a little boy when I wrote these books. He would have been about 13, 14. And I had started writing, and he would go to sleep under my office table with a big pillow under his head, and he would ask me what I'd been writing about, and I would read to him what I was writing about. He'd say, "I want to go there. I just want to go there." So yeah, I think you'll find after I finish the trilogy, the next book is all about my trips overseas to different parts of the world and the people I've met there and the things I've done. Just been a lot of fun.
Sure, Kez. Being a wanderlust is a unique experience, I guess. I have one final question because I'm also an audience from YouTube. You talked about having equal affinity for both poetry writing as well as fiction writing. If you can try your hand at any other form of literature other than these two, what would it be? Yes.
Oh, what would it be? As I said before, I think I would try and write crime like a woman detective in the 1940s. I think that would be fun. A bit like Dr. Holmes, a little bit like that, but a woman.
Oh, a female Sherlock Holmes then.
Yes. See, now you've given me a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Kez, for answering all the questions from our YouTube audience. Those are the questions we have from YouTube. You have been a tremendous guest today on the Writer's Preview, and I hope that you will revisit us and talk about your future releases, Kez.
I'd love to.
And I want you to say goodbye to our YouTube audience before you go, Kez.
Goodbye, and thank you for watching and listening. Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Kez. That was Kez Wickham St George talking about the Kapatri. She gave us an insight into what the book is all about. I'm sure that our audience on YouTube are now eager to read the Kapatri after listening to her. From all of us at Litreal, we thank Kez Wickham St George for joining us today on the Writer's Preview. Thank you so much. The time has come for me to talk about an interesting quotation from literature. Let's talk about today's interesting quotation, which comes from Mulkraj Anand. He is a prolific writer from Indian English literature. I quote, "Our tragic age demands poetry of courage and not whimpers about the inevitable end of all Maya." Here, the quotation has two meanings. One meaning is that society demands lyrics of bravery and not cries of help. Another meaning from this quotation is that it reveals Anand's search for spiritual enlightenment at the end of his literary career. One quotation, two different meanings. I say that's the true beauty of literature. This is Karthik saying goodbye. See you on the next episode of The Writer's Preview.